This is Kingdom Commerce, and today's episode starts now.
Have you ever wondered what it takes to truly understand your target audience? Well, in this episode, we will be discussing market research with some experts in the field. Scott Moffitt is head of partnerships at Ideal Strategic Partners, where he works with hundreds of entrepreneurs to get their product to a successful launch. One of the strategies they use to make sure they're successful is they go through a market research process. I've also been through this process as Scott's been guiding me through it in my own project. I'll be able to share some of my stories, and Luke and Joe will be able to ask some great and intriguing questions. We hope you enjoy this episode and learn much about how market research can help you in your business. Let's jump right in. Welcome, everybody, back to this episode of Kingdom Commerce, the first episode of Season 2. Scott and I we're ready to jump in to some talks about market research, and we have a lot planned for this season beyond market research, including funding, what to know about debt, stewardship. So we're excited. We're starting this segment off with just Scott and I, and Joe and Luke will join us at the end. So Scott is the co-founder of Ideal Strategic Partners. He works with many entrepreneurs taking their idea from a napkin or not even a napkin and turning it to a product and into a business. There are a lot of steps in between getting the idea from a napkin to a profitable business. And one of those important steps is market research. And Scott and I, we've been working together. He's helped me a lot with one of the projects that I'm working on. I've learned a ton through him, and I would love to share some of the experiences I've learned from a young entrepreneur trying to start my first business. But first, I think our audience and I would like to hear a little bit more about your background as an entrepreneur, but also tell us a little bit about the process that you go with your portfolio partners, how you ensure that their product has proper market fit.
Sure. Great questions and a great topic. So my background in with Ideal Strategic Partners as a co-founder is I oversee what we call the front end of our business, meaning that the thousands of inquiries and submissions and ideas that we receive, my side of the business and my team is really sifting through to find the projects that have what we call a white space, enough opportunity. So they have to kind of fit within a box of market size and a lot of different dynamics. What are the competitors in the space? Can we find differentiators? And so the market research is important, and we'll circle back to that in a minute. But in terms of what we do is really just finding the right partner and the right project. And when it comes to the right project, that's where market research becomes an important component. And you mentioned it being an important component. So we utilize at Ideal Strategic Partners a process called Idea Path. It's a proprietary process. It's 4 stages. It's the same process whether you are launching an athletic product, a medical device, a mobile application, a household good. The process remains the same. And the way that that's accomplished is that everything that we do moving forward in the other 3 stages, which are strategy and branding, a product development, and then market launch, everything is really based on and predicated on what we uncover in market research. That is our guiding light. It's our North Star. It's our compass, and drives everything else that we do from that point moving forward. So it's important. I definitely would say it's the most important part of our process that we take our partners through in that process of bringing them to market.
So when I first decided that I was going to start a business, I didn't even really know what market research was. And I wonder if that's kind of the same for our audience today. If you could describe market research in just a few sentences, what would that be? And why is it so important?
So it's preparation, really. We've all heard the saying, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. I don't think that not doing an extensive amount of market research is necessarily a one-way road to failure. I strongly believe, and we validated this, that appropriate market research and making sure that you're doing sufficient market research will shorten the amount of time that it will take to get your product to market successfully. It will also limit the amount of mistakes that you'll make, or time you have to go back and change things. And in doing so, time is money, right? So when you make mistakes, or you have to go back and revisit something, not only is that costing you time, it's costing you opportunity as well.
So it's kind of like the dummy tax,
Yeah.
You don't know, you make the mistake, it costs you.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately what happens is a lot of times they'll either run out of patience, or they'll run out of resources before they end up getting to what we call a tipping point. And we'll talk more about the tipping point later as well.
We talked briefly before kind of about the lean startup methodology. We've talked about trying to not spend a ton of money before getting your product to market. Essentially, you don't want to go into debt. You don't want to necessarily get investors right away. So I'm assuming a lot of our audience, they have their ideas, or they've just started. They don't have a huge runway. What are some of the ways that they can do market research at a very affordable price, or maybe even for free? What are some of the strategies that they can utilize in order to understand, is my product or service actually something that people will buy, or is it something that I just like myself, or so it's just a hunch that I have that people want? Because we want to validate, is this idea going to work?
Great question. So I'm going to actually turn it around for a second and ask you a question, Cooper. So when you started with your venture and your company, Gloves, what you're a passionate runner, right?
Right.
You've been running since you were what, 8, 9, 10 years
Yeah.
old. You love to run. You know what the problems are that you've experienced, right? And so it's likely that others have experienced that as well. What you believe to be the right solution is what you brought to market.
Right.
And that's very common. And it's, when we went through and did market research, there were things that we uncovered. So I guess, and I'll talk more about, and answer your question directly, but what did you take out of market research? Because you kind of did it both ways,
Yeah.
right? You started on your own, and you brought a product to market, did pretty well, you got some great feedback. But then when you and I worked together and we went through, formal market research, what did you see the difference between the two?
Yeah, so you're right. I've been running my whole life. Been running in cold climates. So in the wintertime, it gets below 20 degrees, and your fingers feel like they're gonna fall off on long runs. And so I think there's a little bit of pride that was into it, where it was like, I'm a runner. I've been doing this for a long time. I know what's gonna fix people's problems. I know what's gonna fix my problem. And so I kind of went in with that mentality, instead of trying to understand, who exactly was going to buy this product, and if they were going to buy this product. I thought more of, where they live, what percent of this target audience that I'm making up can I acquire. There are these presuppositions about my idea, and to get more specific, I was creating a running glove, and that had no fingers to it, because when you keep all your digits together, you get that retention of heat is way better and more efficient. And for me, I was like, I don't need my hands to run, and I just assumed other people didn't. And so that was when I started on my own, working through that process. I made my prototypes, and I did all this work without actually validating the idea. And so what I learned through just talking to people is that some people liked it, some people think it could have been a lot better. And when we started talking, you basically introduced the idea of doing a deep dive market research. And one of the things that you said is, like, you need to know who's going to buy this, where they are, how much they were willing to pay for it. You can't assume these things, because you might be wrong. And there's a lot of, like, you talk about market psychology that goes into this as well.
Pricing, so yeah.
Pricing psychology.
Sure.
And so we went through a process of creating surveys.
Yeah, so let me touch on a couple of things, and I was taking some notes as you were talking. It's okay to have predispositions about what you feel the solution is. I mean, again, being a runner, running as long as you have, experiencing the problem, you are more qualified to have a predisposition than I am, than the vast majority of people, of what the right solution is. Here's the challenge. As an entrepreneur, you have to be a voracious learner. Like, you have to have, and my business partner uses this phrase all the time. You have to have learning agility, right? You have to be able to learn and at the same time be able to take what you're learning and put it into action. That learning never stops. When you launch a new product or a brand, your flagship product or service or anything for an entrepreneur, it is going to dictate your brand reputation. And so it's so important that your flagship product is, number one, your core focus. You can already have in mind a product roadmap, and it can evolve this way, that way. I can add these different products and all these different SKUs, and this is how it can build on each other. And that's great to have that vision. You have to be a visionary. So, but you have to realize, yes, there's a forest, right? But you have to focus on that tree, because if you miss the mark on your flagship product, a lot of times consumers will always just associate your brand with that initial product. That's why it's so important. And so, when we talk about, the problem, this is kind of one of the big dichotomies is the problem for you was your hands got cold. Couldn't feel your fingers. You wanted to keep running outside. Not sure why, but you still wanted to keep running outside in sub 20-degree weather, and you enjoy it, but you didn't want to have frozen hands, and you felt like it was impairing you, right? So that's the problem. Instead of Cooper determining what the right solution is, you need to let the market determine the right solution, because unless you're going to be your only customer, which we know is not the case, then it's important that you're catering and understanding what the market's going to be most receptive to. So, focus on the problem and then let the market determine the solution.
Yeah, and so that makes a lot of sense when you talk about the flagship, because that's kind of where your perception is of that company. If they miss the first time, why would you think they would succeed the second?
Right. And a lot of times you just won't get that second chance, right? If you deliver a subpar product or misses the mark, it's, generally that brand and the association is going to be, it wasn't quality or it didn't meet my needs. And you're just not likely in a lot of cases to get that second chance. So let's talk about practical steps, right? A lot of people that are starting a business, we're going to talk about funding and how to raise funding, but the lean startup methodology is just that. It's a lean startup methodology. So, unless you have unlimited resources, which even if you do, you should still steward your resources, because nothing is ours, right? It all belongs to the Lord. There's a ton of resources out there, tools to be able to accomplish this. So let's talk about kind of the practical or the data points, I should say, that you're looking for, right? So number one, who is your target market specifically? When you're launching a product, a service, a business, anything, you have to understand your ideal target market. Now, your target market could be huge. For example, if someone's launching, a baby product, who's your target market? Not babies. It's probably going to be the mother, generally the mother and maybe the father as well, but they're the ones that are making the purchasing decision. So it's important to keep in mind that is who your purchasers are. But then you want to get even more specific. You want to really understand age range, gender, geographic location, income level, hobbies, interests. What are other things that they do, so you know where you can kind of market to them? And you're really building a buyer persona. So if you kind of envision like a dartboard, right? Initially, you should be focused on just the bullseye. Now, your market will expand. It has to, into lower probability, maybe still high probability, but lower probability markets. But initially, with any business, it doesn't matter if it's a lemonade stand, what kind of business it is, you have to generate revenue right out of the gate so you can reinvest that revenue, you can water the seed, and you can grow the company. So it's, what is the path of least resistance to low-hanging fruit? Who is that target market? That's number one. Number two, what specific product or solution is that market going to be most receptive to? Again, unless you're going to be your only customer, then it matters what the people that are going to buy, what they think the right product or solution is, more than it matters what you think it is, right? And so how do we find that information out? Surveys, focus groups, competitive landscape research, and we'll talk about kind of the SWOT analysis component and how that works as well. But running surveys, there are so many resources out there. I mean, you being a college student, you're not flush with resources to be able to go and hire a market research firm for $10,000 and have them perform this research. So what did you do? You utilized resources like Google Forms, There's
Right.
also a platform called Pollfish, and in the resources tab, we'll include some links here as well. Pollfish is another one. They run your surveys for you. You can have qualifying questions to make sure that the questions you're asking are to the people that actually fit your target market. If they don't, then their answers really aren't as relevant to you, right? And then there's a Survey Monkey will help you put surveys together. Now, they don't actually run the surveys for you, but they'll help you really formulate solid surveys, and that's so important. So what size, what material, what color, what customization, what features, what functionality, what price point, what price point, what price point, what price point. And I don't think I could say it enough. If I had, in 16 years of helping entrepreneurs launch new products and product-based businesses, if I had a nickel for every time people came to us with a phenomenal idea, they set out to solve a problem, they isolated the problem, they came up with a solution, and the solution solved the problem fantastically. I mean, flawlessly. Bigger problem, or ultimately what became the dead end, or becomes a dead end in a lot of cases, is when you find that to manufacture or produce that solution, it's going to cost 3 times what the market's willing to pay. It doesn't take an economist to tell you that's not a business. It's a really expensive hobby, right? And so that's number 2. And then the last data point is, where does your target market make these type of purchasing decisions? And that varies, right? Sometimes it's trade shows, sometimes it's e-commerce, direct to the website, Amazon, social media, influencers, wholesalers, distributors, channel partners, retailers. But those 3 data points, your who, your what, and your where, they drive everything else that you do moving forward. And we'll circle back to how that works as well.
Yeah, this resonates a lot with my experience and you helping me out with that. We put together a survey asking a lot about the functionality, because that was kind of the biggest question that you and I had is, are runners going to be okay not using their hands to grab anything? Are they really out there to just run? And we were able to tap into a group of runners. I used Google Forms to develop these questions. I used a platform called Strava, which is like a social media for runners, and told them about my story, told them what I'm doing, told them I'm a student, and I've had over 900 people fill out the survey and give me their feedback, and it's all for free. And so you can use your resources, you can use the people around you who are willing to support you in this process. And so there's ways to do this for free, and we got some really good insights and some really good data.
Let's be specific about that. Let's be specific. So when we first started working together, and I remember when you were on the pitch event here at Cedarville, and I asked you on stage who your target market was, and your answer was college runners, or competitive runners. As we went through the market research, what did you learn?
Well, one, college runners actually makes up a very small percentage of all the runners in the United States, and so that's just such a tiny niche market right there, for one. And secondly, some of the functionality questions we had about, do you mind if you can't use your hands? They didn't all say yes.
No.
Some of them said no, some of them said yes, but we found that if we wanted to actually capture even just the college market, we needed to change the design just a little bit.
Yeah. And that's huge, right? Because then that you're coming to market with something that's effective. It's a perfect example, knowing you personally, Cooper, and our viewers are going to get to know you more and more as well. You're not the greatest at answering your phone. So grabbing your phone while you're running is not important to you. But
right.
But you know what? To a lot of people, the market research indicated it may not be a must-have, but it would definitely be a nice-to-have. So you have to understand, cost is a combination of price and value. Cost is a combination of price and value. So if you can have a high price, but it's not high relative if you're delivering a high amount of value. How do you know if you're delivering a high amount of value if you don't know what's valuable to your consumers? Right. And so that's where it's understanding what that is, and then what people are willing to pay for it. That leads me into the next part, which is kind of the SWOT analysis. So, showing up, SWOT analysis, SWOT, we'll include some resources for that as well. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So you identify products that would be considered to be competition. They don't have to be direct competition. And sometimes if you're entering a market where there's no solution like it, then you kind of have to piecemeal different industries and combine the data to figure out, what's relevant and what's not. Actually, that can be a little more challenging when you're entering without competition. Big misconception, hot tip. A lot of times people will see a product that is very similar, sometimes almost exact to what they're looking to launch, and it's so discouraging to them that they see it. That's great news, because what that tells you is that there's demand. It tells you that there's a need for this product or solution in the market. Not only that, but it gives you a real life case study to be able to study those companies and say, what have they done right? What have they done wrong? Where have they stubbed their toe so I can avoid doing that? Where have they really succeeded so I might replicate some of those activities? And you can learn so much from just studying them. You never go into, and I think we talked about this in the last season.
Yeah.
You never go into a gunfight with a knife, right? So that's the other part of understanding, who am I going up against? How do I find key differentiators? Where have they missed the mark so I can shine in that area? Right.
Right. We look at their weaknesses, the 1-star reviews.
Yep.
What can be done better? Like we said in the last season, it's not always the best to be first to market.
No.
You can have someone else make the mistakes, and then you learn from their mistakes, and you can actually make a better product and get in there. Like the example we talked about with Uber and Lyft, right?
Yeah, exactly. But that was a lot of fun going through that process with you, Cooper, and seeing the results. I'm not a runner, right? And so for me, it was a market I wasn't familiar with. And I was questioning you based on just if it was something you thought was the right solution, or if you had gotten a lot of feedback or input. And when we started, there was some significant, when I say significant, there was some key changes made to the product. I mean, it's the same concept, it's the same product, but product market fit or lack thereof is the biggest reason why companies succeed or fail. And so, if you miss by 10%, that 10% could literally be the detriment to your company. So the more that you can align your product market fit before bringing the product to market, the better probability that you're going to have to succeed out of the gate.
And I really did feel like I learned a ton. We learned so much. We learned that I was missing out on potentially 60% of the target market. And it's if I could change or innovate in this one area, I mean, this business could go from being small to potential to have a huge potential.
And it was a couple small
changes. And so now we're on design the second prototype, and we're working on through that process now, and I'm super excited about it. And we'll see where that goes.
Well, I'm excited to continue working with you on it.
Can we wrap up just a little bit? We always want to kind of talk about this from a Christian perspective, a Christian worldview. We talk about entrepreneurship is stewardship. This is God's time that He's given us. This is His resources He's given us. What are some ways that we can approach market research from a Christian worldview?
Yeah, in one word, I think just intentionality. Being intentional about stewarding the resources we've been given well, and that is, the way to do that is to find ways to make sure that you are crossing your T's, you're dotting your I's. Even the comment I made earlier, the reference of, if you have unlimited resources. Well, if you have unlimited resources, you need to be just as good of a steward as someone who has no resources at all, because it's not ours, right? We're spending God's money, right? And we're using what He gave us, parable of talents, right? And so it's about being prepared, and failure. Let's look at the other side of it. Failure to do proper and adequate market research is going to lead to more money that will need to be spent, taking steps backwards, a longer process, more expensive process. So ultimately, it's about being efficient, being productive, and again, the buzzword is stewarding the resources that we've been given well.
And this is something that I've learned that it's not super complicated. I think many of our, starting off talking about, market research, obviously you got to start learning a few definitions. But for our audience, I imagine many of them being that those aspiring entrepreneurs, they're just starting off. I would encourage them that this is something they can learn.
Yes.
This is not a super complicated concept. You don't need to hire somebody. There are plenty of resources. You can do this yourself and be a good steward of your time, be a good steward of your resources, and actually learn something that'll actually better you as a person, in my opinion.
That's right. That's right. And just some key data points as people are going through the actual exercise. TAM, total addressable market. Who is your market? CAGR, compound annual growth rate. How much is the industry growing year over year? You want to make sure that you're not going into a declining industry, but one where there is, there's growth. And you can see growth trajectory. Those are really important, and just those two metrics alone are really important in terms of what we look at to find something that's worth pursuing.
And we'll link some resources that we trust and that we like, so that our audience can go check them out. If you want to learn more about how to do proper market research. But we're going to have Luke and Joe come in and ask some questions about our discussion.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks for talking about that, Cooper and Scott. I really need to continue digesting it. But with that said, I wanted to ask, is there anything that you might have for, like, if I'm already 6 months in, but I haven't done this, or like any ways that you suggest I go into it now, start my market research and really approach it the right way?
I mean, that's pretty much where I was in the process. I was probably already 6 months in. I was pretty confident that I had, the right information and I knew my target audience well, but I wouldn't say it's too late. I don't think it's ever too late to understand, to continue to learn about who your target market is. And so I would say jump right in, learn what you can, understand your target market better, because if you can acquire a larger share, that's better for you and your business.
And not just that, but Joe and I were talking about this before. You shouldn't be discouraged if you've taken action. So many people don't take action, right? And so the fact that you've taken action, is a good thing. But then going back, market research never stops when it comes to launching a second product, third product. So don't be discouraged because you're 6 months down the road and you didn't cross all your T's and dot all your I's. Use it as an opportunity that you've learned some things, maybe difficult lessons, right? But now you can revisit them and kind of pressure test them.
Oh, here's a question for you. Maybe this is a good one for Scott. So let's say whether I'm starting or I'm further in going, oh man, I got to do some catch up. What are the one or two most important ones? I know you guys talked about several things to do, but if I had to pick off one or two to do right away, the most urgent, the most important, what would be those top two? We've already heard about them. Explain, just give us the items.
Know your customer. Know your market. Know who you're looking to appeal to, and what, or who you're looking to capture, and then identify. And this is kind of a second part of it. Identify what they're going to be most receptive to on all fronts, right? Whether it's the product features, functionality, size, material, color, customization, price point.
So it's know who they are and their response to your product or what their interest is in that product category.
Right.
So that you're never flying blind.
And if you've sold, so in that example, if you sold, nobody better to get feedback from than the people who have bought your product, right? Like, what do you like about the product? Initially, whether it's a product or a service, customer service, those early adopters are so important. Handwritten notes. When we advise all of our partner companies for those initial customers, write a handwritten note, build that rapport, ask them, how do I improve?
And if I haven't sold yet, I think in a previous episode you had said to us, just go look at your competitors' reviews, right? Yep. The 5-star reviews, the 1-star reviews, and learn from that.
Yeah.
Either way, it's know your customer and what they are looking for.
Yeah, and polling, we talked about that as well. Cooper and I talked about the different options to figure out, what those specifics are. Product market fit is so important.
And can you just recap the different products that I can use if I'm like, oh, hey, again, the 6 months, and I need to get into market research one more time for us, please?
Yeah, since you went through this, Cooper, I think that'd be a great question for you.
Yeah, I mean, we'll put more resources below, but what I use free resources. So Google Forms. You can ask questions and they give you some pretty basic analytics on, they give you some charts on who answered what. You can design your questions really well, and you can adapt them to your audience. So I'd say Google Forms is great, and then you got to find that medium where you can actually put that survey out there where people will want to support you. And I think it's really important to share your story. You're almost selling. You're selling people. They have to give up their time.
Yeah, they have to want to help.
They have to. You have to tell them. You just show them that it's worth their time to take the survey.
So Cooper, just as we close out the segment, What were your main takeaways? Like if there was the 1, 2, 3 things you want every listener to walk away with, you guys covered a lot of content, but what's like the highlights of what you don't want them to miss?
The more I learn, the more I realize I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
The more I realize I don't know about my target audience. And so, although I believe one thing about what works best for me, may not work best for the majority of my target audience. And so I really need to figure out, what they want functionally and what they're willing to pay. Because maybe what I pay, maybe the majority of people are willing to pay even more.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to cut yourself short. And so I would
That's
say,
a great takeaway is get out of your own way and listen to your customer.
Get outside
That's a big
yourself.
takeaway for you. Anything else?
Yeah. Don't be afraid to do it.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to learn. You don't have to pay somebody. You can do this yourself, especially if you're starting off like a student. That's the best option in my opinion.
What would you say, Scott?
That brings up one really important point, and I want Cooper to expound on just a little bit. So, some of the resources I gave with SurveyMonkey and Pollfish, those are paid services, right? People are taking those surveys, and a lot of times if you don't have any startup capital or you're a college student and you're trying to just validate whether this is something that you should explore or not, you have to try to do things, inexpensive or free, like you said. Talk about just the, putting your nose to the grindstone and what you did in terms of being able to get those results and how you got the people to answer the questions and didn't have to pay them anything.
Yeah. So it took me a while to find the correct medium, to find that jackpot of people that says, yes, I really want to support you. And so I started off in Facebook groups asking, I got into running groups, asking people to take the survey. I got a few responses. And then I realized I needed to change my description up and make it and demonstrate that this is a worthy thing to take your time to take the survey because it's going to provide value to the running community. That's my goal, right? That's the goal of business.
Serve them.
To serve you, to provide value to you. That's the whole goal in this venture. And the fact, if you're a student, that's another big, huge thing because people want to support students and young people. And so eventually I found, like I mentioned earlier, was Strava. You got to find where you have that high density, high committed group of people in your niche. And so for me, that's Strava, the social media for athletics, basically. And I found that they were super supportive and got nearly 1,000 survey responses for free, didn't have to pay for it. And, another interesting thing is like, you can ask so you can say, hey, can I reach out to you again?
Mm-hmm.
And now you have, if they say yes, you have 900
Leads.
emails.
Yeah,
that's right.
And so, yeah, I mean, look, I did a degree in environmental science. I didn't do any. I mean, I did this a few months after I got my undergraduate degree. You just got to take the time to learn it and figure out what works best for your specific niche.
And persist. Luke, you want to close us out?
For sure. Really, what I'm really taking away at the moment is just I have to do it and get out and just try. And I can always retool it later, and I can always go back and always look at other things. And there's so many free resources. But I know a lot of this stuff we'll be diving in later episode, especially with some special guests that we have coming on. So with that said, guys, if you haven't already, we encourage you to like, follow, share, and subscribe on our social medias. If you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, please share it with your guests and subscribe and be notified for the next upcoming episode. We appreciate you, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
See ya.